very much, Prof. So it's so very close. Would you venture to call it? I know that you look at the numbers a lot. Do you think it's ready to be called?
Organization called Decision Desk, one of the more widely used up-to-date vote aggregators that a lot of analysts are plugged into, has already made that call. As I understand it, none of the networks have done it yet because they're waiting for a little more surety. And I think, I was just watching on CNN, there seems to be a big decision or discussion or debate over at Fox News about, you may recall they actually called Arizona quite early the other day, before most other networks have done, and really earned the ire of the Trump, the White House and the Trump family. And so there seems to be some debate between, at the highest level, the Murdochs and the news managers at Fox, whether they called, and also just what they call Joe Biden after that. Do they call him the person who won the most votes, or has traditionally been known as the president-elect? There seems to be some argument that they should defer to the ongoing court challenges and not use that title until all those court challenges are out of the way. So you'll see a lot of variation across the American news networks in when they call it, and also just the title they use to refer to Biden once they make the call. You use the analogy at the start of the show that he's knocking on the door. I think we're now at the stage where the question is when they open the door from inside the White House, and whether or not there's any adults around the president right now who can take him and steer him away from his worst instincts, and to avoid inflammatory rhetoric. And if he wants to go to court, do it in a procedural way. For example, in the way it was done in 2000 in Bush and Gore, where there was no question about counting votes. It was simply about the reporting and the recount. That was the legal argument, but there was no question of denying anybody the right to vote. So even George Bush's lawyers who ran that legal operation are now criticizing Trump for much of his rhetoric and legal plans right now. So the question is really, is there somebody around him who could steer him away from that, or just people who will feed into his natural paranoia and sense of persecution?
It's really interesting what you mentioned about, and we know that a lot of the news networks actually cut out of the speech that Trump made yesterday when he was alleging that the vote was rigged. The fact that Fox News apparently also cut out of his speech. Do you think that suggests that the tide is turning? That, when a big channel that's always been your biggest fan goes, okay, this is too much even for us?
Well, there's always been a real tension. People who study media bias have demonstrated over time that Fox News, the actual news hour, and the newsreaders are just slightly right of center, as CNN is just slightly left of center. The real extremities at Fox News are the news entertainers, the Hannitys, the Ingrams, and those are the people who are way to the right, but those are the people that the president often listens to, and it's almost a symbiotic relationship about the president saying something and Sean Hannity replying to it, or the president taking inspiration from what he hears on Hannity. So again, I think there's a real tension between some real professionals who work there, people like Chris Wallace. And in fact, when the president made his first news conference, Wallace said, you're taking an inflammatory situation and you're throwing matches into it. There's real tensions and divisions within that organization. And as I said, it's, his decision desk called Arizona for Biden before anybody else did. And that set off a real intra-family, debate and a vicious wing of the Republican Party.
We also know that Georgia has just said that they will do a recount. Of course, it's extremely close. Well, they're both on 49.4%. I mean, there's just a few thousand votes.
And that would be automatic.
That's automatic.
I think most state laws say if the result is within 0.05% 0.5%, it's an automatic recount. In Wisconsin, there's no such law, so the aggrieved party, the losing party, can request that. They would have to foot the bill for the recount, which is quite expensive because you have to pay thousands of vote counters to work overtime for the next few days to recount and to reconcile ballots. Georgia, that's automatic, and that's really what's happening with the two new developments today, Pennsylvania and Georgia. As we said the other day, Joseph Biden is already on 270 with the states that he had really won or was leading in, over the last 2 days. The big developments today of edging ahead in Pennsylvania, Georgia, as your previous spot said, would push him up well over 306 electoral votes. Really big difference in terms of the legitimacy, the perceived legitimacy of his victory, and the ability to avoid legal challenges. If it's just a single state that may make the difference, you can anticipate a full press from the Trump legal team and marshaling any kind of argument it can, however specious, to try and overturn that. If it's 3 or 4 states, I think the matter is really quite different, and maybe in that case you could see some wise heads and cooler heads at the White House.
Because of course the worry is that with more recounts happening, that creates a longer period of uncertainty to a certain extent. And the worry is that there's going to be, if Donald Trump is allowed to continue to say things that have no basis in fact, he could stir up his base, which is significant, and there could be concerns about civil unrest. Do you think that threat is still there, or is it abating now?
Well, there already have been, crowds circling around counting centers in places like Nevada. I think a man was arrested carrying a gun or driving a car. Again, I shouldn't speculate if I can't remember it precisely, but there was also some arrests made. So people who are passionate about it, this is where leadership, or the lack thereof, really come in, are crucial. You only have to think back a few years where the Republican Party had people like John McCain, who, when his supporters would say outrageous things about Barack Obama, would correct them and would challenge them. And when it was clear he lost, he went on television and made one of the most gracious, concessive speech one could ever see. It's hard to imagine this president doing those things. So, but again, it's really a question about whether those people around him are able to do that in the way, for example, that people around Richard Nixon were able to find people on Capitol Hill in Congress, senior Republicans, and bring them to the White House and lay out the truth to Richard Nixon that now was the time to go during the impeachment in 1974. And that's really the open question. If the people that the Trump administration started with, so if your chief of staff was still John Kelly, former Marine Corps general, or if you still have people like John Mattes in the no relationship, but John Mattes, former Marine Corps general at the Defense Department, those would be the senior people who would probably sit down, put their feet up in the White House and say, you know what, Mr. President, you've done a great job. But, I think you deserve to go back to New York and enjoy your retirement.
Yes, well, let's see what Donald Trump's next move will be. Thank you very much, Professor Robert Mattes, political analyst from the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. He's also an honorary professor at the University of Cape Town.